You see, I've played a lot of Devil May Cry 5. I've gotten an S rank on every mission, I've cleared the Bloody Palace with all characters, and I've gotten every achievement there is to get. It stands to reason I might be the best DMC5 player to have ever lived. But my hunger is not yet sated. My heart yearns for more power. Which is why I've conceived a new challenge. A challenge so foul I could not find a single video of another person attempting it. And that challenge is to complete Dante's missions in Devil May Cry 5 using only Cavaliere. The rules are simple. I'm only allowed to have Cavaliere, either the standard version or the red one, equipped at any time. This is a journey for a man and his motorcycle only. Breaking this rule is pretty much impossible, as you can unequip every other weapon after you purchase the irregular full custom upgrade, which is nice. I'm allowed to use other tools in Dante's arsenal that don't hurt enemies, such as Devil Trigger, Trickster Tricks and Royal Guard blocks. I am however not allowed to use any form of Royal Releases, or to activate Sin Devil Trigger, as these effects cause damage or crowd control enemies. Though I am allowing myself to use the Rose Taunt, because, come on. I have to beat every mission in the game where Dante is playable, which means I can't skip mission 16. Also, I have to play on Dante Must Die difficulty, because you can't spell Devil May Cry without cry. Now, I understand that some of you may not have played DMC5 and might be asking yourselves, why Cavaliere? The reason is simple. Cavaliere might be the most overlooked weapon in the entire game. While most people love its design and its introduction cutscene, in-game the weapon does have some issues. So, what does the weapon do and how does it work? Cavaliere is essentially a magnetic motorcycle powered by dreams and gasoline that can split into two on command. The weapon also has a gear system, allowing you to switch gears if you make additional inputs while you're striking an enemy. Attacking in low gear essentially deals no damage, with the added benefit of making your attacks faster. The high and ultra high gear allows you to deal massive damage, while sacrificing almost all of the speed the lower gear provides. If we actually want to kill enemies in higher difficulties, the low gear is almost completely unviable, unless we quickly want to proceed to a later stage of a combo. This means that during every fight throughout the entire game, we will be spending most, if not all, of our time attacking in the higher gears. While this may sound okay on paper, it comes with a few downsides. Being stuck in longer animations, especially underground, gives your enemies many opportunities to strike you. This is an even bigger bane on the Dante Must Die difficulty, as the enemies are faster and hit way harder than usual. All of these attributes often leaves Cavaliere overlooked, both in regular playthroughs and combo videos alike, which is exactly why I wanted to attempt this challenge with this weapon in particular. Also, it just looks really cool. As for the version of the weapon, we will be using Cavaliere R for this challenge. The differences between the weapons are not that big, but Cavaliere R looks cooler and has access to the move Red Line, which will come in handy sometimes. That means that today we will be joining the war on microtransactions on the side of microtransactions. And so, the question is, can we beat Dante Must Die using only the funny motorcycle weapon? Without any further ado, let's rock! As Dante is eating pizza for the first half of the game, our challenge actually starts at mission 10. While this mission is one of the easier ones of this challenge, it still introduces some of the hardest enemies for the Cavaliere to deal with. The first mandatory fight goes by without much challenge at all, really. The small grunts are extremely easy to deal with, which maybe speaks for itself. And since the only real challenge here, the Queen Ampusa, is very immobile, I can easily just wail on it using Cavaliere's aerial Swordmaster attacks, dispatching of her fairly quickly. Also, you might want to get used to seeing this attack a lot in this challenge. As I mentioned before, staying on the ground with this weapon in this difficulty is basically a death sentence in the long run, as it is very easy for enemies to take advantage of our massive attack animations. This is not necessarily true for attacks in the air, however. This is for a number of reasons. The first one is straightforward. Most enemies can't fly, let alone attack you at an elevation, making the air the safest place in DMC5. The second reason is that enemies can't attack you from off-screen, with a few exceptions. At an elevated height, the camera is often easier to keep away from enemies, making sure that they can't prime attacks for you as you land either. Cavaliere has other aerial attacks as well, which we will use at times. This one just has the added benefit of being really fast to execute after using a trick to position us in the air right in front of the targeted enemy. I'm also fairly sure it deals the most damage out of the few options it has. After running for like 10 feet, we find ourselves in the second mandatory fight of this mission, containing my least favorite enemy in the entire game, the Helgideka. The Helgideka is a summoner, spawning enemies if you leave them alone for too long. This is not the main issue with this enemy though. It's the teleportation and sketchy attacks that I cannot dodge to save my life that's the issue here. His spinning attack is especially an issue, as this is borderline undodgeable if you have initiated an aerial Swordmaster attack as it teleports to you. In spite of this, we get lucky this time, making it out of this fight without sustaining too much damage. The third mandatory fight, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of those in this mission, introduces us to the fake motorcycle enemy, the Chaos. Just like in Fate Stay Night, imitations are no match for the real deal, as Cavaliere's armor-breaking capabilities make quick work of their spikes, rendering them practically harmless. Moving on to the next fight, things get a little too real, as we face the true skill check enemy of this challenge, the Fury. Now, this enemy is fast. Really fast. If you try to attack it normally, you're essentially only attacking its afterimage, dealing no damage in the process. So, how are we meant to handle them? The best way to handle a Fury is to parry one of its insanely fast attacks, which leaves them open for counterattacks for a few seconds. The issue? Well, this is where I should probably come clean, guys. That part about being the best Team C5 player to ever exist? Yeah, I might not be Guinness World Records certified just yet. While I am half decent at the game, I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea how to handle the Fury using this weapon. While Cavaliere has notoriously long attack animations that lend themselves well for parrying, this is only true while you're attacking an enemy, as you cannot switch gears while attacking the air. This means that our options for parrying have fairly tight timings. In a moment of weakness, I resort to only using Redline, the dash forward thingy, to parry its attacks. While Redline is really fast and has a lot of frames to counter the attacks with, its recovery animation is about as long as the Snyder's cut of Oppenheimer. This leaves me with very little room to actually deal damage, making my combos deal more damage to my own self-esteem than to the Fury. After a few minutes of desperately trying to run him over, the Fury finally succumbs to old age. Let's also grab some more red orbs, as I clearly need some more for the road. The fifth fight contains another Heldriteka, along with some butchery things. Here we get some great use of the move Wheelie Jump, which allows us to launch enemies high up into the air. This move is useful for separating weaker enemies from the crowd, allowing us to kill them in the air, which is beneficial. Other than that, we get hit by the spinning attack once more, and then make our way to the next fight. Also, those of you with keen eyesight may have noticed that I sometimes start with a higher Devil Trigger gauge than I ended the previous fight with. I don't think we need to talk about why that is. The next fight sees us kill some more fake motorcycles, until we're forced to take on yet another Fury. This time, we have the pleasure of having to deal with some unkillable firebats at the same time. This goes just about as well as you'd expect, but at least we make it out in one piece. Going into the final mandatory fight of this mission, I gotta admit, my hubris is through the roof. When I was playing this mission to earn my S ranks, I remember having a lot of issues here, but this is all going well. A bit too well, maybe. My ego gets the better of me, and I die almost instantly, bringing us the first, but certainly not last, death of this run.
This how it ends.
After torturing myself with yet another attempt at killing a Fury, each one somehow worse than the last, we finally managed to make it back to the Knights and show them a real Inquisition. After this, we face the boss of this mission, Sitting Urizen. I of course bring out my A game, and last about 14 seconds before finally being humbled for the second time in this run. The unique thing about this boss is that you're actually supposed to die here, which means we have successfully completed mission 10, with 2 deaths to our name. After our stunning performance in the last boss fight, we decide to take a well-deserved nap outdoors, to the sound of the chirping birds and the spring breeze rustling the leaves on the trees. 2 weeks later, we're rudely awoken by some twink wielding the Devil's Sword Sparda, which we are not allowed to use anyway, so what's the point? The enemies that spawn at the beginning of the mission are optional, but I decide to fight them anyway, as I know we're going to need the Devil Trigger for later. Which should become blatantly obvious as the first mandatory fight of this mission includes yet another Fury. Oh god. Remember what I told you about each Fury fight being worse than the last? Yeah, this is definitely the worst one so far. To be honest, I should probably have formulated a strategy beforehand for dealing with this guys using the Cavaliere. But to be fair, the camera is not making it any easier. Over the course of 2 painstaking minutes, we lose about all of our Devil Trigger and half our health. Luckily for us, the next optional encounter allows us to gain a lot of these resources back. It is now the real fight begins. Mission 11 is a fairly short mission, containing only 3 mandatory encounters and a boss fight at the end. The issue is that these 3 encounters take a long time each because of our, shall I say, circumstances. The Fury explains itself, but the next fight will be the most clear example of how the Hell Judeca can be extremely annoying as well. Though most of this comes down to myself being greedy, trying to get an additional Swordmaster hit before they teleport, causing me to be locked in an animation as they hit me. As such, this fight brings about my third demise of this run. But don't worry, we're not done dying just yet, as the third and final mandatory fight of this mission is brutal. It's very similar to the last fight of mission 10, with the Angelos and all, but the camera is harder to manipulate in this arena. Like I explained earlier, enemies will basically never attack you from off screen in these games. Instead they will attempt to move into the view of the camera and then strike you. This means that we can kind of manipulate the AI into staying put by keeping the enemy off screen, giving us a lot more breathing room in the process. This is why you'll see me trying to single out enemies a lot of the time, and it's very important when we only have access to a weapon as slow as Cavaliere. Unfortunately for me, I'm not that great at following my own advice. By keeping this nobody on the screen for too long, the enemy is actually called nobody, I'm determined to throw any shade here because it will murk me in a second or two. It throws away one of its eyes, which I then proceed to land on, causing the fourth and probably funniest death of this run. Speaking of funny, the checkpoint for this fight is absolutely atrocious, forcing us to destroy the bold things, fight the fake motorcycles and the Hell Judeca again before being able to retry the last fight. Something else that is funny is that I proceed to die in this fight again and again. After managing to end the Hell Judeca fight with a lot of health and getting some extremely lucky health drops in the last fight, we are finally blessed with a new checkpoint as we prepare to take on Cavaliere Angelo. Now, if I were to create a tier list of all the bosses in DMC5, Cavaliere Angelo would definitely secure a spot at the top. When you boil this fight down to its core, it sounds very simple. Parry its attacks, attempt to stun it by breaking its armor, and don't let it charge too quickly. And in all fairness, it is pretty simple. But that's what's beautiful about it. The simplicity is what allows for so many different approaches to be viable and reliable at the same time. This is of course valuable to us, as we can only use one strategy. And as the name might suggest, this is probably the best boss matchup for the Cavaliere in the entire game. Unlike with the Fury, we can actually shift gears and parry at the same time now, practically making the parry guaranteed so long as we don't whiff. Since high gear attacks deal colossal damage, and since Cavaliere has excellent armor breaking capabilities, we can also break the boss's armor a lot easier than most weapons. Okay, enough talking, let's get to fighting. Remember the 3 core pillars of Cavalierism I told you about before? Yeah, so we parry the attacks, break their armor, and we don't let them charge. The rocky start to this fight causes it to end in tragedy, as Dante falls when a light breeze would have been enough to knock Cavaliere Angelo over. So let's add one to the counter, shall we? For our second attempt, we lock in and manage to stun lock Cavaliere Angelo down to about a sixth of their health. After a few unfortunate whiffs at the end of the fight, we managed to pull the plug on this boss with about 2 minutes and 45 seconds on the clock, making it not that much slower than the average Fury fight. Jesus Christ. With that, mission 11 comes to a close, adding a total of 5 death counters. Wait. With that, mission 11 comes to a close, adding a total of 5 deaths to the counter. Mission 12 is an interesting mission, to say the least. When it comes to getting S ranks on Dante Must Die, this mission is easily one of, if not the worst mission in the entire game. The style points you get from enemies suck, the mission is really long and the layout is a confusing mess. If you try the riskier route of getting a no continuous bonus at the end of the level, you run into another issue, which is this guy. The second Urizen fight, or Urizen 2 as it's more commonly called, has some of the most unfair, infuriating moves in the entire game, which can easily end your run, even if you manage to get by the rest of the level unscathed. But more on him later. Luckily for us though, we don't have to care about any of that just now. Style points? We're connoisseurs, enlightened beings that know that using only the Cavaliere is more stylish than that number on the right of our screen can ever get. Because of that, this mission is fairly straightforward, which my PTSD-ridden heart is truly grateful for. We can even perform the shortcut by the statue, as we have the only weapon that is actually mandatory to have for this skip. Despite that, it took me an embarrassing amount of attempts to pull it off. When I eventually managed to get up there, I actually landed on the frame on the door, right next to the platform we wanted to land on, which I didn't even know was possible. The second mandatory fight of this mission, if you can even call it the second one since we probably skipped some, is where things get really interesting. And with really interesting, I mean really bad. as we were forced to take on not one, but 2 Furies at the same time. I last for about 2 minutes and 45 seconds before succumbing to old age myself this time. After enduring some more irreparable damage to my mental health, we finally managed to send both Furies to Brazil in a staggering 2 minutes and 50 seconds, officially making this slower than the fucking Cavaliere Angelo fight. How this challenge is still alive, I do not know. The rest of this mission is fairly uneventful. We kill some more guys, we gather some more red orbs I'm definitely going to spend someday, and eventually we make it to the ruins of our childhood home, standing atop of the hill before us. Here, Dante decides to stab himself, absorbing the Sparta, which he might as well, I guess. It's not like we were going to use it anyway. After gravely wounding ourselves, we unlock our upgraded version of Devil Trigger, the Sin Devil Trigger. As I mentioned before, this is virtually useless to us, as the only move we're allowed to use here is the teleport. All the other moves either deal damage or stun enemies in some way. While the teleport is actually kind of useful, Sin Devil Trigger is simply too cumbersome to activate. To enter Sin Devil Trigger, you must first fill this red bar by sacrificing your regular Devil Trigger to fill it. After that, you can hold and release the Devil Trigger button to enter Sin Devil Trigger. The problem with activating it this way is that it actually launches enemies into the air, making simply entering Sin Devil Trigger illegal in this challenge. But wait, what about Quadruple S? I hear some of you nerds say. And you're right, by utilizing Quadruple S, we can dip into Sin Devil Trigger momentarily, as long as our style rank is Triple S. This skips the initial transformation, allowing us to teleport safely to enemies without stunning them. The issue with this is simple. The risk of us releasing this by mistake, which believe me I've done multiple times, outweighs any real benefit of us teleporting like this. As such, the beginning of this fight is the only time we will be using Sin Devil Trigger in this run. Speaking of this fight, Urizen 2 is one of the worst boss fights in this game, in my opinion. Most of his attacks are entirely fair and well designed, but he has a certain homing tentacle attack that is borderline impossible to dodge in the air and a toss-up to dodge on the ground. This means we have to play this fight a bit safe, knowing we will have to sacrifice some health to this attack. Other than that, he is also completely immune to damage while its crystal is intact, much like how sitting Urizen was. This means we have to break the crystal a number of times in order to defeat him. Luckily, the aerial attacks of the Cavaliere are really strong and keep you in the air for a good amount of time, which is key to breaking the crystal somewhat safely. So after breaking his crystal thrice and forcing him to fall to his knees a number of times, we actually managed to defeat Urizen on our first attempt, which is a first for this challenge. Concluding mission 12, our death count has increased by 1, which is a lot better than I was envisioning. Mission 13 is the only mission in this challenge where we get to choose our character, even though our answer to this question is fairly obvious. This mission has always been one of my favorites, since it's basically just 3 massive arenas with some of the best enemy types in the game. The rooms are also filled with spawners that you have to break in order to proceed to the next floor, meaning you can essentially continue fighting for as long as you want. But today we're not here to have fun, we're serious gamers here on a serious challenge. Which is why I definitely didn't die from fucking around too much on the first floor. Twice. But maybe that's not too surprising, seeing what we're up against. You see, this is the first fight where we have to face the Behemoth. The Behemoth is, just as the name implies, a behemoth. They have a massive health stat, along with what are probably the strongest attacks in the entire game. That includes bosses, by the way. When they're chained up, they're fairly passive and slow, but once they are unbound, they gain speed and become far more dangerous. When playing normally, you usually go aggressive at the start of the fight, while they're chained, and then proceed with caution once they actually start moving. This is doubly true when they use their own Devil Trigger, which they practically always will, since they have so much health. In this scenario, a smart player would formulate the strategy by looking at the tools available for them in the current moment and plan accordingly, evaluating the possible risks and opportunities each alternative presents. At this point, you should know I have none of these qualities. But what I do have is this really cool spin-out attack that also looks really funny and can be repeated infinitely. By sheer skill, this actually somehow works. Unfortunately, our victory is short-lived, as I die mere moments later on the next floor. Does this stop me from using the spinning attack again? Absolutely not. Does it work this time as well? Absolutely not. What we can do is attempt to use it again against the fake motorcycles on the next floor, which works just about as well as you'd expect. The spinning antics leaves my brain absolutely rotten, leading to our third death so far on this level. Just as glorious Wristman was about to save the day. On our fourth attempt I can feel something's different. Almost as we were having a guardian angel watching over us from the sidelines, granting us power. We make quick work of the spawners on the third floor, using our forbidden spinning technique. And with the help of our new ally, we destroy the roots and make our way to mission 16. Hey, don't look at me funny, it doesn't say anywhere that cat girls can't use other weapons. Mission 16 is a search and destroy mission, where we have to find and kill a pupper with dissociative identity disorder. If this was Hades, I would be very upset by this, but in this game I consider it more of a mercy kill than anything. Guarding the dogs are hordes of enemies, but apart from some cursed jump cancelling and a few behemoths and Helldreckas here and there, most of the encounters go by without breaking much of a sweat. That is, until we jump down this hole and encounter a new enemy type, the Death Scissors. These enemies are unique in a number of ways. They are extremely difficult to take down using regular attacks, but if you manage to parry any one of its attacks, they become exposed for a few seconds, allowing you to shoot them for an insta-kill. You probably noticed an issue in that sentence. That's right, I can't parry attacks to save my life. No, but of course we don't have any guns, completely removing our chance to one-shot these enemies. And on top of that, we're placed in a room with like 10 of them and a fucking Fury. Because of course, why would they not put a Fury there? Much to my surprise though, it seems that we can actually still pull off the one-shot under certain circumstances, using Cavaliere. Probably because its hitbox is so massive or something. This weapon truly is beautiful. With some jump cancelling shenanigans, we're almost able to follow the scissors back to where we jumped down from, getting rid of them with a lot less hassle than I was expecting. That leaves only the Fury left, which we actually managed to kill in 1 minute and 20 seconds this time, which is a pretty substantial improvement from our last fight, so I'll take it. We then jump down another mysterious hole, where we find our target. Despite clearly being an adorable puppy, King Cerberus is probably the third hardest boss in the entire game, depending on who you ask. This makes itself abundantly clear, as I die mere seconds after entering the arena. While King Cerberus is the third hardest boss, we're quickly introduced to what is the second hardest boss just moments after, Auto Mode. If you didn't know, Auto Mode is essentially a mode that helps you perform combos if you struggle to do them yourself, making your inputs do completely different things each time. This is absolutely awful, and I refuse to believe someone actually plays with this setting turned on. What makes this even better is that you can turn it on by holding down the right stick, which makes me toggle this on by accident sometimes. The second worst thing about it is that I always forget how to turn it off. Needless to say, this attempt didn't go all too well. Neither does our third attempt. Nor our fourth. It's at this point I realized that going onga bonga without a game plan probably isn't going to work here, so for the first time in this challenge we have to use our brains for a minute and try a different approach. Instead of attacking constantly in his fiery state, I try to use Royal Guard to block his attacks and return fire only when given a proper window for it. This allows me to get a lot farther than before, even though I still die. While I'm at it, I should probably explain Royal Guard in a bit more detail. Essentially, the Royal Guard style allows us to block attacks, completely negating their damage. If we block attacks with subpar timing, some of our Devil Trigger will be consumed. But if we guard with perfect timing, we gain Devil Trigger instead. This allows us to punish the puppies even harder once we were given a window for counter-attacking. Despite our newfound strategy, I still die. Until eventually, I perform a Royal Release by accident. This is the first time I've actually broken a rule of this challenge so far, so let's dust off the rule breaks counter, add one to it, and start again. After getting mauled once again, I'm starting to think that I might actually be at my limit here. I haven't even managed to bring him down to low health yet, which is when this fight truly gets dangerous. Feeling a bit defeated, I decided to take on King Cerberus one last time before taking a break. This attempt starts off pretty weak, as I get hit twice for absolutely no reason. My guarding is also subpar, leading me to take even more unnecessary damage. Slowly but surely, we work our way through his health bar, which, if you compare to the previous bosses we have fought, is pretty massive. Given our fairly limited windows where we can do damage, this just goes on forever. Form change after form change, we finally manage to bring them down to their Devil Trigger, which, as I said before, is when the real fight starts. I get sloppy and get hit a few times where I really shouldn't have been. But after 10 whole minutes of this grueling game of playing chicken, we are finally given the opportunity we wished for, defeating King Cerberus and overcoming our biggest hurdle yet by far. Cleared using auto assist. After sending his puppet to the afterlife, Urizen has done some cardio and is ready for revenge in the biggest showdown with him yet. This time he doesn't have his annoying tentacle attack, nor does he have his crystal, leading to a much more enjoyable fight overall. A fight in which Cavaliere actually has a lot of play. The fight starts off strong, as we reach a triple S rank before even touching the guy. And we show off why the Cavaliere is as strong as it is here, making quick work of his first phase. His second phase isn't much of an issue either, but his summon swords can be a bit annoying as we can't break them reliably. By taking an unnecessary hit here and there, we lose our vitally important S rank. Luckily for us, Urizen has a heart of gold. Or blood, maybe. So he decides to give us our rank back just as he enters his third phase. This is where the fight gets a little bit more tricky, as his newfound strength from a gym allows him to move really quick and dish out some really powerful attacks. What Urizen didn't account for is that although his calves are big, they're not powered by gasoline, even after messing up and almost dying twice. We still managed to send this gym bro back to Planet Fitness in our first attempt. Mission 18 takes a page from Mission 16's book, as it involves Dante mercilessly killing Virgil's beloved pets once again. But hey, at least the chicken asked for it.
Kill yourself later! I'll help!
Which is very convenient for us, as Griffin is first on the shopping block. The fight starts off with me perfectly remembering the timings of all his attacks. As has been the case a surprising number of times this run so far, Cavaliere actually has a decent matchup against Griffin. When he hovers in the air, we can simply use our trusted aerial swordmaster combo to quickly expose its core, allowing us to damage him. After repeating this a few times, the chicken hightails it, allowing us to use some nearby enemies to fill our deviltry gauge as we make our way to the tabby cat. Just like for Griffin, Cavaliere's damage can quickly expose the core of Shadow as well. The difference between Griffin and Shadow is that the cat refuses to stay still. Also, he's very pointy. The key to winning this standoff is patience, biding your time and waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Which is why I repeatedly use Trickster to teleport into his face, causing him to leap back 10 million times, making this encounter take a lot longer than it has to. On the bright side, being absolutely brain dead allows us to unlock a secret Cavaliere move, the semi-reverse red line.
The fuck?
Using our newfound technique, we send Shadow packing as well, leaving only one mandatory fight left for this mission. Before that though, we take a little detour to collect even more red orbs I desperately need by killing some red Impusas outside the arena. This apparently unlocks the last blue orb fragment I was looking for when I was completing the health bar achievement, which I could have sworn I had already gotten. Oh well, cool, I guess. The third fight sees the bird and the cat form an unholy alliance against man. What they didn't realize is that this fight is a fight against man and machine, meaning the fight goes fairly well for us. This is also when I realize I can stun lock Shadow if I position my attacks correctly, instantly exposing their core again before allowing them to attack. This could probably work against Griffin as well, but it is a bit harder as he gains a lot of elevation back when breaking free from the stun. After being run over countless times, the critters book it one last time, leaving only the boss fight left. This is one of my least favorite boss fights in the entire game, as you have to fight the chicken, Shadow and Nightmare at the same time. And remember that thing I told you about enemies never attacking from off screen? Well, this does not apply to Shadow and Griffin, but Griffin in particular has some really shitty attacks he can pull off. This is mainly an issue on Hell and Hell difficulty though, as you die in one hit there, so I guess we'll see how it goes. Me finding out I can simply stun lock Shadow and Griffin actually comes in really handy, as I'm able to utilize this multiple times during this fight. Granted, this might also be because Nightmare gives us a lot of chances by constantly respawning them over and over. Honestly, I don't remember how you're supposed to navigate this boss fight, but I think you're supposed to focus on the critters, as he sacrifices some of his own vitality when resurrecting them. But don't take my word for it. What I do know, however, is that Cavaliere is strong enough to interrupt Nightmare as he attempts to drink the lean pouring out of the ground, stunting his health regeneration. This alone knocks a minute or two off the fight. After resurrecting Griffin and Shadow one last time, Nightmare finally exposes their core, allowing us to kill it by vehicular manslaughter. Nightmare slaughter? On our first attempt yet again. I did not for a million years think this was going to go by so smoothly. I remember being stuck on this boss for days on end during my first playthrough on Dante Must Die, and that was using all the fucking weapons. That really goes to show you how far we've come. And it definitely didn't have anything to do with Griffin barely using any moves for the entire fight. After a fight like this, I'm fairly positive it's impossible for us to get humbled. We're simply too amazing at this point. This is it, the final showdown. Dante versus Virgil. Mano a mano. Or, perhaps more aptly, mano a moto. I don't think Virgil needs much of an introduction at this point. This guy is considered to be the best boss fight of every game he's ever been in. Even considered by many to be the best boss fight in all of gaming, period. And it's easy to see why. He is quick, menacing, and really fucking cool. Despite that, pretty much all of his moves feel entirely fair, making this fight a true display of excellent boss design, as well as a true test of skill. Speaking of skill, I have to admit that my first attempt of beating him was kind of pathetic, as we mess up every single timing he has. Not only that, we also try to dodge his devil trigger charge using grounded trickster dashes, which is not a good idea if you value living. This is our first death since mission 16, bringing our death counter up to 20. Which means we started mission 19 at 19 deaths. That's pretty poetic, if you ask me. Also, you may have noticed something different about Virgil's Devil Trigger when compared to other bosses and enemies in the game. For other enemies and bosses, Devil Trigger basically just gives them higher damage and a ton of damage resistance. This is also true for Virgil, but he also gains some other unique qualities, as his Devil Trigger is pretty similar to our own. He gains health regeneration, which I cannot reliably stop, since I can't lob rockets at him like I usually do. He gets faster, he uses different moves, and a lot more judgment cuts. And he also charges at the end of it, as you saw before. Our second attempt doesn't make it much farther, but at least we correctly handle his charge this time. For the third attempt, I get frustrated for some reason and decide to use a checkpoint. I guess this isn't technically dying or a rule break per se, so let's just add a new counter for this. After attempt number 4 goes straight to hell, I get some flashbacks from mission 16. Maybe it's time to actually take this seriously if we want a decent shot at winning this. Because so far, we haven't even seen him use Devil Trigger twice. New strategy. Wait patiently for an opening. Parry the summoned swords to gain Devil Trigger. Use said Devil Trigger to punish his attacks as he's sheathing his sword. Keep dodging or parrying as he uses his own Devil Trigger. If we manage to do this, we should be able to reach his second use of Devil Trigger without losing too many resources. Another thing we need to be wary of is his attack where he slashes twice. If we stay close to him as he performs this attack, he will strike thrice instead, leaving us with a big opening as he sheaths his sword. Okay, let's play a small game. When Virgil exits Devil Trigger, he stops and stands still for a bit. What should you do when this opportunity presents itself? Should you 1. Bide your time, wait for him to strike again? 2. Taunt, increasing your Devil Trigger gauge in the process? Or 3. Dash in like a fucking moron? At this point, I sure as shit don't need to explain to you what I'm choosing. Fooled me once, shame on me, right? Luckily, while I often take unnecessary risks the first time, I am also intelligent and adaptable to changing circumstances. Which is why I only fall for this 1, okay 2, 3, 4, 5, alright, only 6 times. See, we're adapting. After his first activation of Devil Trigger, the fight gets a lot harder. Most of the punishable openings of the first part of the fight are now gone, being replaced by extra judgment cuts instead. His non-DT judgment cuts are also much more relentless than before, being much faster and much more many. In addition to this, he also starts summoning swords around us and himself a lot more often, which we have very limited options of dealing with. If he summons them around us, we basically have to stand still, fight in the air for a few swings, which isn't too bad, all things considered. When he summons them around himself though, we are fucked. We have no options of handling this with Cavaliere that doesn't involve turning ourselves into sliced cheese, so spamming B it is. We can, however, also use the secret technique of pissing him off to handle the swords. He also does this thing. This is probably the coolest thing of all time, but unless you're standing in this big ass circle like an idiot, you should be alright. This is also the biggest window of opportunity you will be given post Devil Trigger, so we have to use it wisely. The second best opening we will get is when he dives on top of us, summoning swords around us in the process. Here we can simply use the good old Trickster Swordmaster combo to launch him into the air and destroy the swords at the same time. Using all of our combined brain power, our fifth attempt goes a lot better as we manage to force Virgil into his third phase. This is where we run into a major issue, the doppelganger, which promptly attacks us when we are off screen, killing us instantly.
Fucking come on, man.
The doppelganger is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a second Virgil that has a lot less health. Despite that, he is extremely annoying, since our options for handling even one Virgil at a time are not the greatest. But at least we have proven to ourselves that we can make it this far now, which is a massive improvement. On to attempt number 6. Here we actually managed to show off a proper punish of Virgil's 4 judgment cuts, which is a lot harder than it looks. I don't think you have even half a second to pull this off, so that feels pretty good. We also get to see the doppelganger again for about 5 seconds before dying, so that's something. But I'm gonna be honest with you here, it's starting to look a bit bleak. So far, when we reached the third phase of the fight, our health has been way too low for us to be able to kill the doppelganger. And if we don't kill the doppelganger, the fight is over, as we can never punish Virgil without having to tank whatever it decides to throw at us. The perfect example of this can be seen during our 7th attempt. Despite the camera making its best attempt to fuck me over, we still managed to actually kill the doppelganger. But as I mentioned before, we cannot do so without sustaining massive damage in the process, allowing Virgil to turn us into guacamole yet again.
I mean, come on, man.
Our 8th attempt is our most stylish try so far. I mean, just look at this parry. Pristine. We also absolutely ball on Virgil and the doppelganger as he summons it. Despite our best effort, we die to the doppelganger yet again.
Oh, fuck.
In our 9th attempt, we can see firsthand what happens when you don't respect the summoned swords. If he hits you with a certain number of them, they leave you dazed and unable to move for a few seconds. You can't break out of this state using Devil Trigger either. For the 4th time thus far, we get the privilege of seeing the doppelganger for a few short seconds, before turning into a scrumptious meal of crispy sliced roasted potatoes, baked in the oven at 190 degrees for 60 to 70 minutes, served with crispy bacon bits and fresh herbs. Attempt number 10 is a shaky one, as admittedly most have been so far. This is the 5th time we get to see the doppelganger in this challenge, but just as Cinco de Mayo, this time feels different. Just as we try to remove the summon swords from ourselves, the doppelganger, like the true American hero he is, dashes into my rescue, killing himself instantly. Okay, chance ball. We've never made it this far before. You can block all you want, asshole. I'm taking this win. Okay, I can feel it. This is the one that dreams are made. Oh no. Unless you're standing in this big ass circle like an idiot, you should be alright. Being stuck in longer animations, especially underground, gives your enemies many opportunities to strike you. I am also intelligent and adaptable to changing circumstances. Wait a minute. I just remembered I'm the best DMC player of all time.
Oh, fuck. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Yes! Yes!
And with that, we say Hasta Manjana to Virgil, finishing the final mission of this challenge with a statement of an S rank. Wait, how did we manage to get an environment record bonus here? What can you even destroy? The chair? As the sun sets, our journey comes to an end. If I'm being honest, I thought this challenge was going to be a bit harder than it actually was, even though some enemies and bosses definitely gave us a run for our money. Another thing I did not expect to come from this was me finding some newfound love and appreciation for Cavaliere. When I initially set out on this run, I thought I'd never want to see the thing again after all was said and done, but I'm glad I was proven wrong. It really goes to show how well designed the weapons in this game are, as Cavaliere was viable throughout the entire challenge, with some hiccups here and there. I know this is my first video, and that my editing and script writing skills probably aren't the best yet, but I still had a lot of fun making it, and I'm really grateful that you've made it this far. If you want to, you can leave a suggestion for another challenge, or just a video idea in general that you want to see me tackle. I have some other ideas I want to give a try, but I'm always open to suggestions. It would also mean a lot to me if you would consider liking, subscribing, or just leaving a comment, as I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Well, that's all I had. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day. See ya!
you down.